What's up, peeps? Chris Santiago here with another video, and today I'm going to be doing another reaction video. This guy came up on my YouTube feed list. I had never really heard of him before, but I've kind of gone through his channel, and again, he looks like he has a lot of good topics. His name is Headspace with Spiro. As always, I'll leave a link to a channel in the description below. So let's check out what he has to say. All right. So without further ado, here's my reaction to Headspace with Spiro. Here we go.
I really don't know who in the right mind thought that isolating people for almost 2 years was a good idea. Now, I've done research into this topic of isolation, stuff like that. And I'm someone who was always, I would say, more of an introvert growing up. I wasn't the most sociable person, but I was never fully isolated. And a lot of the times, what people don't seem to understand are the potential consequences and ramifications of real, pure social isolation. Like a lot of people in the streets in the city I'm in, there's a big kind of population of people on the street. A lot of the times people think that their mental illness or behavior is substance induced, but a lot of the time it's actually isolation induced. They start to go crazy. And even I used to listen to
Certain people do, yeah. I mean, it depends on the individual and who you're dealing with, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people can't handle isolation. They've been around other people their entire lives, and when they suddenly get thrust into a situation where they're on their own, they kind of mentally crack. So yeah, I agree.
a YouTuber who was in prison, and he luckily was able to change his life around. That's kind of what his channel was based on, was life after prison and stuff like that. And he talked about how he would be near people who were in solitary confinement, where they had complete social isolation, and they would be losing it. They would be screaming, yelling, banging their heads on the walls. And since the kind of opening after the lockdowns, which in my city, we had probably stricter rules than a lot of other cities across the country. But nonetheless, what I saw after things opened was a world that was almost unrecognizable. And of course, yes, we had social media, we had the internet, which I've touched on in previous videos, but things were exponentially different. It was exponentially harder to meet new people, to find decency and really compassion or any form of care or acknowledgement.
Well, honestly, even before 2020, I think things were kind of rapidly going in that direction. You the whole thing about the pandemic, or the scamdemic, as I like to call it, you're going to get all these assholes. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Da, 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 da. Well, like I've always said in other videos, what's the difference between a conspiracy and the truth? Well, in just about 6 fucking months. So, but anyway, I think the path that we were headed down would inevitably lead us to that, outcome anyway. Just, the whole social isolation thing, you know, the lockdowns of 2020, I think that was just an amplifier. I think things were already headed in that direction. So,
From one another after these kind of lockdowns. Like there's been many times where I would go to grocery stores, and I'd walk down kind of crowded aisles and say excuse me, and people wouldn't even acknowledge you, wouldn't move, wouldn't say anything. They almost had this kind of 1,000-yard stare to them, like zombies. And I'm not trying to be rude or call people that, but that's kind of what I've been able to derive and notice from these kind of things. Like even I would leave the grocery store, and security guard at the door, I'd try to acknowledge them, nod my head at them, anything, and same thing. They'd have this 1,000-yard stare of really no care in the world. Another thing I noticed too was this big lack of honesty, but also lack of trust among people. Like now in the area I'm in, and yes, I understand.
well, I mean, it makes sense. You isolate everyone for a certain amount of time, and I think distrust is just a natural thing that kind of builds up. You're not around other people all that much. So really the only person that you really trust is yourself. So everyone else outside of that bubble kind of becomes suspect. So it makes sense from a psychological standpoint.
Crime as a factor, but you have receipt checkers at the door for people who are leaving, people who are buying their groceries. It was not like that before. You didn't have codes on restrooms. And my issue with that is you shouldn't punish an overwhelming majority of people, meaning most law-abiding people, because of the actions of a few, because of the actions of a very small percentage of people going into the grocery store. It's really an unfortunate thing. Like, even if you guys are familiar with the Seattle area, we have a Target right in the heart of downtown Seattle. Though I believe it's First and Pine or First and Pike. And literally every single thing in that store is locked behind glass. I'm not kidding. And of course, when I was growing up, we were all growing up, jewelry, high dollar items, video game consoles.
Well, I mean, that just goes to show you that I don't think that it has anything to do with the pandemic per se, but it's just, high crime has just been going through the roof because of certain policies of a certain political party that begins with a D and has a fucking jackass as its icon. I guess you can put the pieces together from there.
Yeah, those were locked behind glass, but I'm saying every single thing. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, anything you could think of is locked behind glass. And I think that's too why you see a lot of people not wanting to even go out anymore. There's been many times where I've kind of pulled up to a supermarket and I'm like, I don't even feel like really dealing with it. I don't feel like dealing with the rude people. I don't feel like dealing with, the kind of lack of acknowledgement or respect for one another, the disrespect. But which is a shame, because what we should honestly do is no matter what, do not lower yourself to that. You should still smile at people, still greet them if you can. Don't let these external things affect you. But I'll be honest, there are just some days where maybe I'm feeling a little bit just not in the mood or whatever, and I'm just like, I don't even want to bother with this. Unless I really need groceries, I don't want to bother with it. And I remember too, when grocery stores and things.
Well, that's kind of, the way that I look at it too. It's just, I've become so, well, I mean, I've always been naturally distrustful of others. I don't call it a conservative trait. I don't know, but I have always been very, very mistrustful of anybody around me other than a very small group of people that I, know that I can count on one fucking hand, that I know that I can trust. Everyone else is pretty much suspect. So that in and of itself isn't unusual. But yeah, I do think that things have been amplified ever since 2020 and ever since the lockdowns. But like I said before, I think this was inevitable. I think we were already headed down that path, firmly down that path. So I don't think anybody can really blame 2020 specifically or the pandemic, because things were already headed in that direction.
Things used to be 24 hours when you could go to a Kroger, depending on what state you're in, or a Safeway or a metropolitan market at any time of the evening. Now, a lot of them, they close at 11, 10 p.m. even. So if you're someone who gets off graveyard shifts, works very late nights, and you need groceries, water, necessities, you're going to have a hard time with that, because things aren't open as late as these. So I remember even 24-hour fitness. I don't even know why it's called that anymore, because a lot of the locations, they close at like 9 p.m. I've seen in some cases, yet it's still.
Do they? That's something I hadn't heard of before, because we have a 24-hour fitness not too far from where I live, and they are indeed 24 hours. Now, I haven't been there in about a year or so. Maybe things could have changed, but that's weird. That's very weird. I would have to look into that further.
Called 24-hour fitness. Before the lockdowns, every single 24-hour fitness was, as advertised. It was 24 hours. That's something that's very different now. Something that's very different. And even to touch on something else too, with the whole lack of trust, I know this has been a thing for some time about mechanics or people like that, kind of cheating people. My little brother had recently gotten a car from a dealership, and he heard some screeching on the brakes when parking the car. And this was like right after he bought it, essentially. And he had taken it back to them and told them about it. And they had told him that, oh, well, these are performance brakes and this is normal. I mean, that to me sounds like the biggest gaslighting I've ever heard. To say that that's normal for those kind of tires. It still does that. If he parks the car reverse it, it's still doing that. It's not, I wouldn't consider it a performance vehicle. It's an SUV. It's not a super tuned up SUV or anything like that. It's a daily commuter. So I don't see how that could really be the case at all. And even with trusting people, I'm tired of every single thing being about money or some kind of monetary exchange. I had a friend of mine when I was around 21, 22, which, was a lot less.
Yeah, we've become a very transactional society. So, I feel him when he says that. So, yeah, I do know where he's coming from.
Mature back then. I didn't really know to appreciate certain things. But he was from Iraq, so he grew up in a very different culture. And I remember he had given me a ride somewhere, and I instinctually kind of offered him $20 for gas, and he looked at me and just said, dude, you don't need to pay me for that. I'm your friend. I'm doing this out of care, out of wanting to help you, out of wanting to spend time in the car with my friend and talk. That's worth more than any amount of money. And I don't see that enough nowadays. Again, this is someone from a different culture.
I don't see that at all these days, honestly. I mean, I just do it out of courtesy. If I'm riding with someone else or they bring me, I always do it out of courtesy. Here's a few bucks or whatever. But no, now that's become a sort of expected thing. So don't ever take for granted that somebody's doing something for you just out of the kindness of their heart, because that's just not how things operate nowadays.
Different mindset. I see a lot of times now it's like, oh, you give me a ride to the gym and I pay you for gas and then I buy you food and this and that. That there has to be some form of exchange. And even with the money stuff, what these lockdowns stuff created, the cost of things just getting way too out of control. Way too out of control. Like, I used to go to the grocery store. I remember my parents would go on vacation when I was younger. This is around probably right before the lockdowns or a few years before then. And I'd be able to spend $35. I'm not exaggerating. $35 for a week's worth of groceries. Now, yes, I was being pretty strict and clean with my diet. I would get chicken breast back when it was $1 or $2 a pound. I would get bulk amounts of rice and beans, and that would be enough. But nowadays, the times I've been at the grocery store, I'm spending like $80 a bag now on groceries. That's really a shame. It's horrible that we're in a case where so many people are struggling. So many people are anxious. So many people are angry. And, we can talk about the social media phones. I'll touch on that a little bit too. I've touched on it in previous videos, so I don't want to make this video about that. But even the other day, I was at Macy's with a buddy of mine, and there was a father going down the escalator, and he had probably a 4 or 5-year-old son with him. The whole time, he was looking down, glued on his phone. Meanwhile, his son runs ahead of him, is running amok around the store, just running up and down the Macy's department store, down the aisles. And I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, get off your phone and watch your kid. I mean, God forbid anything happens to that kid. I've heard of crazy stories, stuff like that. But it's like, dude, put the phone down and watch your kid. Why is your 4 or 5-year-old son running around the store, running across the store while you're sitting there gluing your phone? The guy gets up, he's like, oh man, he's like, finally back to reality. He wakes up and he gets his son and gets out of there. I see that way too much now. Way too much now. And it's the point where with the social media stuff, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. I have a problem, as many people do, with it being addicting.
No, absolutely. I like to pride myself on saying that I'm not on any social media other than YouTube, which I don't really consider a social media platform. But I got off that bullshit years ago. Like, it just hit me at a point. I think it was actually, it was during 2020, just a little before. No, it was during the lockdowns, right? But it was right before the whole George Floyd bullshit, where you really saw people's true colors on that, and that kind of was the kick in my ass that I needed, to get off all these social medias, Facebook in particular. Oh, excuse me. I was like, you know what? Fuck this. This is bullshit. People are just a bunch of savages lying just underneath the surface. I don't want to deal with any of this shit. And I deleted. I mean, all I really had back then was Facebook, and I think I might have had an X account back then that I just didn't really use, but that was really it. I never got on Instagram or TikTok or any of this other trash. But yeah, that was the kick in the pants. That was the real mask off type of moment, which everybody showed me their real true colors, and I'm like, fuck this. I mean, it's performative bullshit anyway. I mean, social media, again, Facebook in particular, is just a bunch of performative trash. Nobody is living an authentic life when it comes to that. I mean, everyone's on there, posting, oh, I'm doing this, or I'm hanging out with this person, or I just made this much money. It's all fucking fake. It is fake as everything. I mean, it's just, and if people aren't faking their shit, they're using it as some kind of bullshit therapy session where they're just airing out every ounce of dirty laundry that they have. It's garbage. Absolute fucking garbage. Fuck social media.
But ultimately what that comes down to is discipline. The discipline to get off social media. There's no excuse for it. I'm certain, and from what I've heard from other people, that getting off that stuff, you're going to feel your mental health get better. My little brother was wrongly which I've heard of weird glitches and bugs like that. He got his account back, was wrongly suspended on Instagram. And he almost didn't even want to get back on there. He said he felt so much better being off it, being off the phone. I think even now he's told me that he has notification stuff. He might even have the app deleted. You know, and again, like I said, there's no excuse. The reason why I've had it is because
I mean, it does serve, some practical purposes, absolutely, with communication, with keeping in touch with certain people. Yeah, it has its goods, it has its pros, but I think people have just, as with most of everything else, people abuse it, people take it for granted, people let it become addicting. It becomes, something that becomes irreplaceable in their lives, and it becomes a problem when it was never meant to be that in the first place. So nowadays I think people just build on the cons, and they just outweigh any pros that we can ever give it. It didn't start out that way. It's just over time this is what happens.
I have a friend of mine across the world who I chat with. I would say he's like family. But there's no reason why I can't just say like, hey dude, let's talk over WhatsApp. We can still talk over Wi-Fi. We don't have to pay for cellular. Let's just talk over WhatsApp. There's no reason to be on there. But that's the thing. It's addicting. And it's almost like they want it to be addicting. It's and even with that, like I said, yes, things weren't perfect before the lockdowns. But with the phone stuff, even with the internet stuff, yes, it wasn't perfect in 2015, 2016, 2017, whatever. Things got exponentially worse after 2020. And even still, the way people would kind of enforce these things, the policies and stuff like that, which I understand there were things going on. But I remember
You know what it kind of reminds me of? I don't know if anybody remembers Back to the Future Part 2, right? Where they came back from the year 2015 into an alternate 1985. What did Doc Brown say? We spewed into this tangent, creating this alternate 1985, right? So that's kind of what it feels like now. After 2020, there was just some kind of a time rift in the space-time continuum, and look where the fuck we are. Some people like to joke around that whatever fucking godlike alien is running this fucking simulation, they must have spilled coffee all over their console to end up with this shit, right? I mean, that's what it fucking feels like. I'm just almost waiting to stick my head out the fucking window and see Biff fucking Tannen running for president or some shit. That's honestly how it feels.
I was in a ferry boat. I was going to Orcas Island one morning. This was 5 a.m. Most of the people that are on the boats that time are contractors. They're usually sleeping in their cars, actually, so don't even get out of their cars. I was the only person in the lobby besides one of the employees that was there. And I remember she had told me to put one of those face covers on. And, I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm the only person here in this lobby.
You still see these assholes. I don't know if anybody, is, drives around these days, and you still see these fucking psychotic pieces of dog shit who are wearing those fucking face diapers when they're alone driving inside their car. It is the wildest fucking shit. The wildest shit. Sometimes I want to roll down the window and fucking curse these assholes out because they're being so fucking stupid. That's what you call quintessential brainwashing right there.
Yet people were so manic about this stuff. Again, there's effects of not seeing people with genuine smiles. I still see people nowadays wearing those, driving by themselves, wearing those.
I just said that.
I guess it's a thing out of habit now. And you can't tell me that that's not going to have some form of ramification, not seeing people's expressions, genuine smiles on their faces. Because let's not forget, too, even if you're talking to someone, again, why I don't like really even talking over text in general, the tone in someone's voice, the look on their face, their body language, there are certain things that are going to be derived and going to be interpreted because of those things. If you can't even see the expression someone's making while in a conversation with them, it sometimes can be hard to see where the conversation is going, where their tone's going, how they're feeling about.
Right. You have to read people's faces as a whole. You can't just get what a person's intentions are, what they're really talking about by just looking at their eyes. It doesn't work that way. We have to read the entire face to kind of, get the full read on people. So yeah, he's right.
Certain topics. It's really a shame. It's again, guys, I don't think people seem to understand just how damaging things were. I mean, 2020, as far as I'm concerned, is when it really started to change. Even when they started opening up again, I remember I was at the gym, and I was not aware of this at the time, but they had some kind of policy where they would allow a certain amount of people in, kind of in sets of a certain amount of people at a time for 45 minutes, and they had to go, and it'd be the next group of people, they'd be waiting in the front. I was not aware of this at the time. And I remember one of the employees very rudely came up to me and said, "You got to go," kind of when I was in the middle of the set. And I was, I quite frankly didn't appreciate the tone and the manner. And again, this 6 feet thing, yet he's like 2 feet away from me. While I'm in the middle of the set, kind of getting in my face, telling me that I have to leave there. And I wasn't aggressive back to him. I almost thought the guy was trolling me, or it was some kind of prank. I'm not kidding. But just seeing the way people were acting and stuff like that, after I'm like, man, this is not normal. Man, it's a shame. But like I said, no matter how it is, we just have to not lower yourself to that. Like I mentioned, still smile at people and acknowledge them if you can. Still try to be decent. Have care, empathy for one another, because those are things that
But to each his own.
Unfortunately, seeing that are more scarce than they should be. But as always, guys, appreciate you for viewing the video. Hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.
Okay, that was Headspace with Spiro. Pretty informative video. Yeah, he's right. He's right. Things really have changed since 2020. Like I said, that was just an amplifier. I think things were headed down that path anyway. It didn't really matter. We were going to get to the same destination no matter what. But yeah, you can really, really notice the difference in people and how people interact with each other, or lack thereof. People are very angry nowadays, and I get it. I do. This is not the way that things were supposed to be, but here we are. So yeah, and you know what? Unfortunately, I think things are only going to get worse from here. They're only going to go downhill. So buckle in, and you better have a plan, because things are fucking going to get rough. You can kind of feel it in the air, as it were. But that's all I'm going to say on that topic. Leave what you think down in the comments below, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Later.